HECCMA is a consortium of 10 colleges here in and around central Massachusetts. I think most of you are from central Massachusetts as well, either as guidance counselors or as juniors and seniors or parents of prospective college students. And we're so glad to have you here and answer your questions. I'm going to go through the panel and have each panelist introduce themselves, their school, and maybe just tell you a little bit about their experience working with financial aid, starting with Amir.
Hello, everybody. My name is Amir Morris, and I am the Director of Financial Aid at Anna Maria College. I've been working in financial aid for about 15 years now, and I enjoy working with the population that we work with because many of these students happen to be students that I see myself as a former student as well, coming from a family with low income, family whose language is in English, first language is in English. So I enjoy working closely with our population and walking them through the financial aid process.
Thanks, Amir. Sue Ellen?
Hi, this is Sue Ellen Dean. I've been at Assumption University for 7 years in financial aid. Before that, I spent 10 years as the Assistant Director of Career Services, running a program for first-year students. So I still get to work with a lot of first-year students, incoming parents in this role. And it's really my passion. I am also the parent who had 3 students in college at the same time, who have all successfully graduated and gone into, right now there's 1 in grad school and 2 are successfully working. So, it was definitely, for me, I have the experience of having that stress of having students all at the same time in college, which can be very challenging.
You are a walking success story, Sue Ellen. Next up, Caitlin.
Hello, I'm Caitlin Laurie. I am the Associate Director of Financial Aid at Quinsigamond Community College. I've been in financial aid for about 12 years, and I have experience at both a high cost private, like traditional 4-year school, as well as at Quinsig, which is a 2-year public institution. So I have a lot of, experience in different settings and happy to be here.
Next up, I'd like to introduce Jeremy.
Hey everyone, I'm Jeremy Greenhouse. I'm the Director of Financial Aid at Worcester State University. I've only been here for 2 months now, so I'm still getting the lay of the land here at Worcester State, but I have been in higher ed and financial aid for about 20 years now. Similar to Caitlin, I've also worked at a 4-year private school. I've also most recently worked at a 2-year public college, Springfield Technical Community College. So I had to take the job at Worcester State to get the 4-year public so I could round out my experience. But I do get to enjoy a lot of different benefits working here at a 4-year public school that you get from both the 4-year private as well as a 2-year public. It's a nice mixture. So I'm finding I'm getting to work a lot more directly with students here, which is nice. Yeah, like I said, I've been in financial for 20 years, and I enjoy the diversity of the subject matter. So.
And the last person from our panel I'd like to introduce is Amanda.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Amanda Woodward Mitchell. I'm the Senior Associate Director of Student Aid at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, also known as WPI. I've been in financial aid roles for about 17 years now, and I work closely with undergraduate students as well as graduate students. And I also have a background mostly in private high cost institutions. I really do enjoy dealing with our diverse students. And I also wear the hat as parent. I have a daughter who is attending college and in her last semester right now and looking at applying for law school. So now I'm going to go through that lens as the parent of an undergrad. So I'm in good company with Sue Ellen as well. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you all panelists. I have some pre-assigned questions that I'd like to pose to each of you, and that should probably take us about 45 minutes to get through. At that point, if folks who are here to listen and participate want to ask some questions, you're welcome to do so by typing your questions in the chat. This is for your privacy, as we are recording this session so that we can post it on our YouTube channel for anybody who happened to miss tonight's presentation. So without further ado, we're going to go right into our questions. And my first question is for Amir. Amir, what is the FAFSA and why is it so important?
Thank you. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid, and it is the application that becomes available every year as of October 1st. That allows families to complete the application to be determined for federal financial aid. The application allows the federal government essentially to gather all of the financial and household information about a family to determine their eligibility for any grants or loans that the student might be eligible for. I sometimes hear families that say that they're not going to complete the FAFSA because maybe they make too much money and their son or daughter will not be considered for financial aid. I always encourage families to complete the FAFSA application anyway. It's a free application. And although their son or daughter may not be eligible for federal grants, they may be eligible certainly for federal loans. And sometimes schools even use the FAFSA as a way and a means to determine their eligibility for any institutional aid, which may come in the form of a need-based or merit-based scholarships and grants. So I encourage families to complete it, even though they may feel or think that they are within a certain income bracket and may not be eligible for any federal aid. Although the federal application is a process that is completed on a federal level, it is managed and coordinated through schools. So although you're completing a federal application, you just know that the schools would be the one managing your financial aid, notifying you and sending out an award notification. Now, in order to begin the FAFSA application, you have to create a Fsa Id, and that will serve as your login credentials for the FAFSA application. Overall, the FAFSA will look at a number of things to determine your eligibility for federal aid. Those things will include income, assets, household size, and your dependent or independent status to determine your eligibility for aid. So again, I encourage all families to complete it. It is a free application. It is a lot simpler now these days than it was many years ago, and families can get through it fairly quickly.
Thanks, Amir. My next question is for Sue Ellen. Who should fill out the FAFSA and the CSS profile? What info is going to be requested? And whose info do you need to collect in advance of filling out the forms?
Sure. So for the FAFSA, and where I work at Assumption University, we are a FAFSA only school. Anyone applying to college should complete the FAFSA. All schools require the FAFSA. So everyone should complete the FAFSA. And one of the first steps is that both parent and student have to create an Fsa Id. So studentaid.gov is kind of the landing page for all federal aid. And if they go to studentaid.gov, they can from there create their Fsa Id, and it can actually link them to create their FAFSA. So that is the very first step. For the CSS profile, it's really dependent upon the schools that the student is applying for. So there are many schools that use the CSS profile to determine what type of institutional aid the student would be eligible. So the main difference is the FAFSA is looking specifically for federal aid, but also, as Amir said, is also used by many institutions to decide their institutional need-based aid. Whereas schools that do the CSS profile, they're using that CSS profile to decide if they're eligible for institutional need-based aid beyond any merit type scholarships. And to begin the CSS profile, the student needs a College Board account, which most likely they've already created if they did the SAT. Now, to sit down and complete the FAFSA, first, there needs to be determination whether the student is dependent or independent. Most students coming right out of high school are dependent students. But the first few questions on both the FAFSA and the CSS profile will ask them some questions to determine that. And the difference being a dependent student on the FAFSA needs their information and their parents' information. A dependent student on the CSS profile will need their parents' information, and that would be their custodial parent. And many schools also require the non-custodial parent. Now, when I talk about a custodial parent, I'm talking about who the student gets support from for more than 50%. And so on the FAFSA, that would be the parent that is listed. And who that parent is married to, their spouse, would also be listed on the FAFSA. And again, the CSS profile, little different. They're going to ask many of them for the non-custodial parent. And again, the spouse of the custodial parent, as well as the non-custodial parent, may have to provide information as well. So again, some of this is very school specific. Again, whether they require the CSS profile and whether the school who's requesting the CSS profile is requesting the non-custodial information. Now, when you sit down to do the FAFSA, the big differences between the two is that the CSS profile is going to look at, for example, the equity in the parent's home, whereas the FAFSA does not consider as an asset the home that the family lives in. But on the same hand, the CSS profile is also going to take into account expenses, such as medical expenses that have incurred. So that's kind of different. Now, when sitting down, the kind of things that the student should have with them is the 2020 taxes. So for the 2022, 2023 FAFSA, it is based on the 2020 tax year. So they should have their the tax returns from 2020. They should have W-2s. They should have any records of untaxed income, bank statements. They should have mortgage info because again, the CSS profile is going to look at that home as an asset. And any records of savings, stocks, bonds, trusts, and any info if they have any kind of small businesses. So the best thing to do is gather that information ahead of time. Make sure you've created your Fsa Id for the FAFSA. You have your college board account for the CSS profile, and you have that information. Now with the FAFSA, there is an option because it is a branch of the federal government to kind of click a button and allow another branch of the federal government, the IRS, to populate your taxes. Makes it a lot easier for you. And if you ever get selected for what's called federal verification and institutions have to ask for more information, it's going to make it a lot easier for you. So I do suggest when completing the FAFSA, rather than manually putting in your taxes, you actually select the button and see if you're eligible to have that information transferred. It makes it a lot easier for you. Thanks.
Just a quick follow-up question has to do with, do each of the students' parents need an Fsa Id, or is it just that custodial parent?
So for the FAFSA, they have to select one. So if it's a two-parent household, only one parent needs to do it.
Thank you for that clarification. Most appreciated.
Yeah.
My next question is for Caitlin. When do I start my financial aid application, and what are the deadlines and requirements that I need to be aware of?
Sure. So as previously mentioned, the applications are actually available now for 22-23, and they become available on October 1st, before that processing year. So they did just become available a few weeks ago. So you can do them right now, as early as right now. And the earlier, the better. Any deadlines for financial aid applications will be clearly stated on the financial aid websites for each school. And it is very important to see what the deadlines are, keep track of them for each school that you're applying to, and don't miss the deadline. It's very important. And also some schools can have multiple deadlines depending on if they offer early action or early decision. A lot of those deadlines are sometime in the fall. A lot of the traditional schools, if you're just applying for regular admission, have, January or February deadlines. But like I said, these deadlines do vary from school to school, and they are all clearly stated on those websites. For example, Quinsig's or Quinsigamond's deadline, FAFSA deadline is April 1st. So certainly pay very close attention to those, because missing a deadline could potentially automatically disqualify you from certain types of financial aid. And also the deadlines, as well as which applications they require, will be clearly stated as well, including the FAFSA, the profile, and some schools do have their own institutional applications as well. So schools can ask for any information that they feel is necessary to determine a student's financial aid. Also, we touched upon this a little bit, but verification. So if your application isn't necessarily done, as soon as you hit the FAFSA, if you are selected, they'll be requesting additional documents that you also should submit in a very timely manner, because at Quinsig, our FAFSA deadline is April 1st, but if you are selected, our on time is considered FAFSA by April 1st, file complete by May 1st. So it's the combination of those two things that sort of are our deadline or define an on-time student. So certainly, yes. So if not, if you don't take anything else away from this, it's to apply on time. I just can't really stress that enough, and I'm sure everyone here would agree with me. And you can, again, start it right now, because the applications are available.
So start it right now if you're looking to go in the fall of 2022, correct?
Exactly.
You don't need to start right now if you're starting in 2023, fall of 2023.
Exactly. So if you're a junior in high school now, or the parent of a junior, you'll be doing it next October. It will become available on that October 1st.
Thanks for clarifying. Most appreciated. My next question is going to, let's see. Is it Jeremy?
Yes.
Yeah. Where should I go to find out about additional financial aid opportunities?
So let's see. So I'll start with the FAFSA. So when a student fills out the FAFSA, a financial aid office is going to use that to determine typically need-based aid. And that could be federal, state, or even some institutional scholarships that are typically awarded through the financial aid office. So that's sort of the main process. The other types of scholarship opportunities that could be available to students would be one awarded through the admissions office, and that's typically going to be merit-based aid. So that would be based on high school academics, different levels, different achievements, that type of thing. So those should automatically be awarded through the admissions office for any merit type of aid. In addition to that, students and families can seek out what's called outside scholarships. And there's a few different ways where those can be obtained. Many colleges, Worcester State, for example, we have a page on our section on our website where students can apply for those for outside scholarships. That would be in addition to any merit-based aid awarded by the admissions office, or any aid that's awarded by the financial aid office. There's typically a time frame for those. So for example, Worcester State's is going to open up in either January or February, and then be open for a couple of months. And that's going to vary depending on the school that you're applying to. So it's always a good idea to check the school that you're applying to see if there's any outside scholarships. Keep in mind, sometimes those might be more for returning students. So you want to check the criteria to see if it's for incoming or for a returning student, or both. So the school's website is one place to check. There's a few other places to check where you could do you could do searches sort of online, that type of thing. But a few good websites to keep in mind are FastWeb and finaid.org. Both of those have good scholarship search engines. Let's see, there's Scholarship America, which some schools have partnerships with. So that's another one where you can check to see if there's a relationship with the school. And the last one I'll mention is Sallie Mae actually has scholarship opportunities as well. Now, Sallie Mae, a lot of people think loan when they hear that, and yes, you can apply for a loan, and that's probably what what they might be looking for. But I did confirm that you don't have to borrow a Sallie Mae loan in order to apply through their search engine, so that the search engine is independent of borrowing a loan through them. But they do have a good amount of resources available. So those are just a few different places that I'd recommend checking. And there's various apps as well too. There's apps out there now as well. One that I knew of was Scholly in the past. That one has some recognition. So those are the places that I would recommend checking for different types of scholarships, in addition to any aid that's awarded by the admissions office or by the financial aid office.
Thanks, Jeremy. My next question goes to Amanda. I get accepted, I get my financial award letter. How do I understand it? How do I decipher net costs?
That is a great question. So assuming students and with the help of parents in many cases have applied for financial aid on time and have fulfilled any of the financial aid application requirements, if accepted, a student will be getting some sort of aid notice from a university or college that they've applied to and been accepted to. And it's important to review that to determine the types of aid that you have been granted. So they fall typically within three major categories. The first and most desirable category would be grants and scholarships. So it could be federal grants, state grants, scholarships from the institution, whether they're need-based or merit-based grants. The scholarships and grants are free money. So they're the best because they don't need to be repaid. Students do want to pay close attention to any contingencies for receiving those type of funds going forward in the future. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So typically they're grouped in three major categories. Again, the grants and scholarships, free money. Then there are loans. So students who are eligible and complete a Fafsa will be getting some sort of indication of their loan borrowing eligibility. For example, a first-year student would typically be eligible for up to about $5,500 in federal direct loans. And those loan eligibility and amounts will increase slightly from year to year. And then the last category, and actually under loans as well, some institutions, our own, for example, might have some institutional loan dollars that they will or might award to students. The last category would be student work or work study funds. So students who are eligible might have some indication of work study funds that they might be eligible for. And typically students, when they get to campus or the summer prior to going to campus, there are some jobs listed for students that students can start to look for perhaps and apply for over the summer for when they come to campus. So those are the general parts of the award letter. And the other half of your question was also about net price. Net price is really important because when you look at each individual aid office or each individual school's website, you'll see information about tuition and fees. And that's really what we call the sticker price. If you're an on-campus student, that might be tuition fees. And if you're on campus, living on campus, that might be board, which is your meal plan, and housing if you're a residential student. So the sticker price are really kind of the overall costs that you might be billed by the institution. That might also include things like books, for example. But net price are those costs less any of that grant or scholarship money. So the net price would be the tuition fees, room or board if you're participating in those programs on campus, books and supplies, less that free money. So you might have a high cost university that's perhaps awarding a lot of grants or scholarships to reduce your net price or what you would have to pay in a given academic year. So that's something that's looked at a given, determined each academic year. That's why it's always important to check in either with the aid office or another representative from the university to find out, do I need to maintain a certain GPA to keep certain funds or scholarship funds in the financial aid notice? So it's important to be able to compare and contrast the different aid awards on that net cost basis to be able to compare what that net price is and make a good financial decision, not only on the fit for the school, but also the financial fit as well.
A lot of information, a lot of great information. Thanks so much. My next question goes to Amir. What's the difference between a grant, a scholarship, a loan, and a work study award?
So let me just start off by grant and scholarships first. So in general, grants are given based on financial need, while scholarships, on the other hand, are based largely on merit that is awarded to students based on their academic achievements, extracurricular activities, field of study, some other demographic information, in a number of different other facets. So by and large, in general, grants are given based on financial need, while scholarships are based on other things related to merit, for example. I would recommend checking some of those websites that Jeremy mentioned to determine what other outside scholarships are available, and also checking your school's financial aid website, because in your school's financial aid website, they may have a complete section that shows outside scholarships or scholarships that are even within the college or university that the student is applying to, that they may be eligible for. So it'll run the gamut. I would recommend, and I typically tell even family members that are applying for financial aid, that pour yourself a nice cup of coffee on a Saturday morning, and sometimes it's best to just crank through a number of different applications that are applications for scholarships, because some of these scholarships sometimes go unclaimed and there's money that's left on the table. So again, I always encourage families to take advantage of those scholarship opportunities. Now, grants are usually awarded by federal and state governments. So, for example, the Pell Grant, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, is the largest federal educational grant out there. And you'll see that reflected on your award notification. Now, grants are determined based on really the difference between the school's cost of attendance and a family's EFC, which, as you know, is the expected family contribution. Now, when it comes to loans, there are essentially various types of loans. So we have the federal loans, also known as the Federal Direct Loan Program, and you might even refer to it and hear other people mention it as the federal Stafford loans, but they're one and the same. So federal loans come in the form of subsidized or unsubsidized loans. So subsidized loans do not accrue any interest while the student is enrolled, while unsubsidized loans do accrue interest while the student's enrolled at that particular college or university. And right now, with the federal loan program, the current fixed interest rate is 3.73%. I always encourage families to only borrow what they need. So even though they may have been awarded a certain amount of federal loans from a particular school, only borrow what they need. So if they don't need it for any incidentals or other indirect costs like room and board or transportation or personal expenses, just inform your financial aid office that you do not want to borrow those loans. So those are federal loans. And of course, there are private loans that are out there. And with companies like Sallie Mae, for example, Wells Fargo, some of these other companies that you've heard of. And those would be private credit based loans. So they would run a credit check for that family. And you would likely be borrowing a private loan to help cover some of the costs that your federal or institutional aid didn't cover. That might be essentially your out-of-pocket cost. And of course, the private loans run the gamut in terms of being fixed or variable rates, and the rate that you are given will largely be determined by your credit. And right now, I'm seeing that there are many families that are being approved for private loans, as they go through the application process. And then lastly, we have work study. And work study is a federal work study program, and it is need-based. So the neediest families will be awarded work study. And if the school offers it, and what ends up happening is that you, as a student, would be awarded anywhere between a few $100s to upwards of like $2,000 per year, and it is an earned fund, meaning that you would secure a job on campus to which you'd be hired through a certain department, and as you work every week, those funds would be deducted as you go through the semester. And you would be earning those funds in setting up a payroll with the university, to be having your funds sent to you electronically. So those are the various different types of aid. So you have your grants, scholarships, federal loans, private loans, and of course, work study. And I think that should cover it.
Thanks, Amir. The next question is for Sue Ellen. How do I accept my award package? And what happens if I don't respond to it?
Sure, this is a great question. And it is also very individual to each school. So I'll talk a little bit about how it is at my institution. So at Assumption, we don't ask students to accept their awards. So they get sent their award letters, and they are also given a link to an accepted student portal where they can see their awards. And we kind of take the approach that everyone's going to accept the gift aid. We've heard about scholarships and grants, and that aid doesn't need to be paid. So we take the approach that to accept your gift aid, you just need to put down your enrollment deposit by May 1st. That's it. You do not have to do anything to accept it. Now, once they put that enrollment deposit down on May 1st, they get rolled over to basically an enrolled student portal, which is a full, portal where all of the students at Assumption are on. This is where they will register for classes. They can see their financial aid. They will interact with faculty. They will be their class groups on there. And on there, that is where they can decline their federal loans. So we do take the approach at Assumption that you're accepting all your aid when you put down your enrollment deposit, but we recognize that federal loans are very different from gift aid because they do need to be repaid. And that is where students can let us know if they want to decline their federal loans, they can. It's not uncommon for students. You heard the explanation about the difference between the subsidized, which is where the federal government pays the interest while the student is in college, and the unsubsidized, where the student starts getting accruing interest. It's not uncommon for a student to decline their unsubsidized and accept their subsidized loan. And so on their enrolled student portal, they can see their aid and they can make those changes to their loans. Now, it is very important to actually accept those federal loans so that they will be applied against the bill. The student has to do a two-step process, and it actually may be going to a three-step process this year with the federal loan acknowledgement, but the student will have to go to studentaid.gov and complete entrance counseling, which is where they learn what a loan is, what debt is, what repayment is, and they'll sign a master promissory note. And the federal government has talked about and put it off due to COVID, a student loan acknowledgement that will be something that the students will also do every year. And so until they do that step process, and the student has to sign in with their own Fsa Id, parents can't sign in for their FSA and do it for them. Students have to accept their federal loans. Until the student does that, the loans are not being applied against the bill. So we realize, especially for first year students, this is new. So as soon as they deposit and move over to our enrolled student portal, we're reaching out to them and letting them know, this is what you have to do. If you're planning to have those loans applied against your bill, you have to complete these steps. Otherwise, those loans will remain in pending. And again, they're not going to be applied against the bill. Also at Assumption, federal work study will stay in a pending status until a student has actually received a job offer, accepted it, and completed all the typical paperwork that you would need for any type of part-time job. So the I-9, the W-4, we have a confidentiality agreement. Until they've completed all their paperwork and actually have an assignment on campus, that stays in a pending status. So again, at Assumption, we assume you're accepting all of your gift and scholarship aid. There are some steps with the federal government students have to do to accept their federal loans. There is a place for them to make changes to the federal loans if they want to decline it fully, or if they want to only accept a portion of it. And then for their federal work study, they have to complete paperwork and get an assignment. Now, I do realize, not only because we get calls every year from students who say, am I supposed to accept my aid? I realize that other schools do it differently. I realize it because students reach out to us, and because, again, I had 3 students attend college, and I know that they had a student portal where they had to check off and accept their aid. So what I would suggest is that you read the award letter very completely, because if there are follow-up steps to that award letter, and the student needs to go to an accepted student portal and accept their aid, then I would follow through with that, because I know that at least one of my students had to do that. One of my own sons and daughters had to do that. So definitely read the award letter to see what next steps are as far as that aid. But again, not all institutions require you to do something very formal, but it is institution specific. Thanks.
Thank you. So I got my award letter and I'm not really loving what I see inside, Caitlin. Is there any way to file for an appeal? And if so, what are the criteria for that?
Sure. So appeals can be considered, and it's typically for a circumstance that may not have been reflected on the financial aid application. So if you don't really have any special circumstances and nothing has really changed, you're likely not going to, the files are very thoroughly reviewed, and the financial aid offices do award anything that a student is eligible for upfront. So unless, like I said, something has changed, or you have an extenuating circumstance that was not reflected in the application, your award, maybe it just is what it is. However, there are lots of extenuating circumstances, possibly now more than ever, especially with COVID. And so if you have had a change in circumstance, certainly contact the financial aid office to find out what their appeal process is. The income information on the application is a prior year income. So a lot can happen in 2 years. And so if you experienced a job loss, a reduction in pay, a death in the family, God forbid, something like that, certainly reach out to your school. And some of the processes can be different. Some have a form, some just simply want a letter explaining. But one thing that will likely be very consistent is the need for documentation. Document. So if you do fall into one of these categories, make sure you are keeping a termination letter, keeping your pay stubs if you're collecting unemployment, keeping any documentation that you may have that would support the circumstances in your appeal. Another thing that schools sometimes consider are high out-of-pocket medical expenses. So if you have those, certainly, keep all of your receipts. But those are typically the things that can be considered. Again, the change in income due to job loss or job change, death in the family, or those high out-of-pocket medical expenses are, traditionally what can be considered. And again, the documentation, because these schools do get audited each year. And if we are making these kinds of adjustments, we have to show what it was based on. So, that would basically be the appeal process for most schools. But again, it never hurts to ask. But if you do fall into one of those categories, certainly contact the financial aid office, and they will tell you exactly what you need to do to appeal your financial aid.
Thanks, Caitlin. Jeremy, what are the ways to pay for college? Do you have to pay tuition in one lump sum? How does that work?
Okay. So I think there's about four different ways I would categorize how to pay for college. Number one, which obviously we've been talking about for the past 45 minutes, is financial aid. So that's number one. That includes grants, scholarships, loans, work study, everything that we've been talking about. So financial aid is one. Like Amir referenced earlier, everybody should fill out the Fafsa. Just because you never know what you may qualify for. Even if you think that you make too much, it's still a good idea to fill it out. The second way to pay for college would be a payment plan. Typically, this is going to be broken down into 9 payments that will be spread out over the course of the year. And you can set it up where those funds would be, directly withdrawn from your bank account. And that's a good way to spread out the costs so that it's done monthly instead of doing it all one time. The next way would be a college savings plan, like a 529 plan specifically. That's something that you would be set up early on in your in the student's life, and the students when the parent set it up when the student is very young. Although it doesn't have, the earlier the better, but it doesn't have to be early on in life. But it's certainly the earlier the better. The 529 plan would be a good way to it'd be investing money so that it would earn interest over time and then could be used towards educational costs. And the last way would be just general savings. That would be the last way. So out of pocket is another way of saying that. And what I usually recommend to families is if the financial aid is not enough to cover the full costs, I recommend a combination of those. Hopefully there's some 529 savings already in place, but if not, taking out a loan and maybe a payment plan and some money down would be a good combination, a good way to spread the costs. That way you're not paying too much each month, and you're not borrowing too much either. So usually a combination I find is a good recommendation that I would make to families about how to afford their college education. And then the last part of your question about paying one lump sum, I think I kind of just answered it. So no, you do not have to pay for 4 years of college tuition all in one transaction, fortunately. Typically it's going to the tuition bill will be due on a semesterly basis. So you'd figure out fall, and then you'd figure out the spring semester, and then the next year. The FAFSA is filled out annually. That is an annual application, which I think was referenced earlier. So that'll get the financial aid in place for fall and for spring semester for the current academic year. You would then need to do it again for the following year. So the financial aid piece will be in place for those 2 semesters when you fill out the FAFSA. And then, like I mentioned before, a payment plan is going to be over a 9-month period typically. Some schools might have some different options, but very common. It's going to be set up for the year, spread out over 9 payments. And then if there is a private loan or a parent plus loan, that would typically be done for the academic year as well. It could be done for one semester. Let's say fall, you had enough savings, but then you needed some additional money for spring. You could do a loan for the spring semester only if you need some additional costs some money covered as well. So the loan, the private loan or the plus loan would be another type of payment as well. So I think that about covers it. Those are the different ways. Again, if there's one takeaway here, it's the combination is the way to cover all the costs. I think that's the way to go if that initial financial aid package isn't enough to cover it.
Thanks, Jeremy. I have one last question for you all before we go to the questions in the chat. And that question is directed at Amanda. What is meant by the phrase satisfactory progress?
Thanks for the question. So you might hear the term satisfactory progress or satisfactory academic progress. And that's an important consideration for students as they begin college and kind of navigate through the year. In order to continue receiving any type of federal aid, and in some cases also the institutional aid, the dollars from the institution, students have to earn good grades and complete enough classes on an academic year basis to keep moving forward toward either completing their degree or certificate in a time frame that is acceptable to the school. So each school might have their own standards to, what rises to the standard of meeting that academic progress. And schools should have this information listed clearly on their website. So it would be if there's a GPA that a student needs to maintain or some sort of equivalent, how quickly students need to be progressing toward graduation, or how many credits a student needs to earn on a semester or academic year basis. Also, whether this evaluation will happen at the end of each semester or at the end of each academic year. And what happens if your student or the student does fail to meet satisfactory academic progress. Some schools do offer an appeals process. I know our school does offer an appeals process when a student fails our satisfactory academic standards. And they're able to fill out a form with our office and let us know about any mitigating circumstances. We certainly had a lot of SAP appeals because of COVID. There was a time where we did not have in-person classes, and a lot of students were kind of struggling with doing classes by Zoom or asynchronous classes or things like that. So we were sympathetic to students who reached out and appealed, and we even proactively reached out to students to say, hey, we know that you were struggling academically. Please know that there's an appeals process for this. So we always do a lot of holistic counseling in the AID office. And if a student comes to us with academic concerns, we do try to connect with them with academic advising. But before you fully make a decision on school and while your student is enrolled in school, it's important to find out from each AID office what their standards are. So that way, your student can reach out if there's an issue and know what's expected of them in terms of good grades and progress, at the end of a semester or at the end of an academic year, to make sure they're eligible to receive those federal funds going forward in future years.
Thank you. Now we're going to just go to the questions that I received in the chat. The first question that hasn't been answered yet was, does the school you're applying to specify that you also need to do the CSS profile in addition to the Fafsa? And would that be on their website in the admissions page, or do they notify you after you've filled out your Fafsa? How do you know that you need to do the CSS? And Amanda.
I work for WPI, and we do, for first year students who are applying for need-based aid, we do require the Fafsa as well as the CSS profile. And the need to do this and the deadline to do the profile as well as the Fafsa is clearly listed on the financial aid website. So we have an early decision application as well as regular decision and a couple of other times when students can apply for admission, and we do clearly state each application is due by a certain point in time. So that way, if a student is admitted, and they do complete both of the applications. Shortly after the admissions decision, we would notify students about those requirements. Most schools, perhaps not all, will have a financial aid portal where students might be informed of the requirements that are needed. So if you've done a FAFSA, the student, and you need to do the profile, a student perhaps could log into their portal to find out about that. But please, it's always important to either check the websites and or reach out either by email or telephone call to the school if you're ever, unclear as to what their application requirements are.
Thanks,
And can I
Amanda.
add one more thing to that, Janine?
Yeah.
The CSS profile website actually has a full comprehensive list for the 22-23 academic year, showing all of the participating institutions. So if you wanted to find out if your institution or the school or college that you're applying to requires the CSS profile, on the College Board website, they have a full listing of every school in the country. So that participates.
Thanks, Amir. Question, if you happen to submit your FAFSA and then you realize later that you made a mistake, what are you supposed to do?
I'll do it.
Go right ahead.
Most schools do kind of like file reviews. And so, for example, when the FAFSA comes into us, right away, they help us. The federal government might identify a few problems. So, for example, if the Social Security does not match what they have on file, they're going to let us know. And then we're going to institutionally select the student for verification and request Social Security information. If the parents identify as married, there's two parents, and they select that they did their 2020 taxes head of household, we're going to institutionally select them and request additional information, which is, again, another plug why if you can do the the IRS data retrieval, it's much easier. So some of that's a little easy. It comes to us with some comment codes on your FAFSA, but sometimes it just jumps out at you. You're going through, a FAFSA, a file review, and you notice the student put down that they made $120,000 in 2020. To me, that just doesn't sound right. So I'm going to request the student's taxes so that we can fix that. So sometimes just looking at a FAFSA, you'll see that there are things that just, when a student lists that they have, untaxed pension payments, that just doesn't sound right. And so we might reach out to them. So it can be very confusing, especially the first year. And sometimes students and parents get confused when they're putting the information in. And we'll see that a dependent student, for example, lists that they have child support paid, but it's the same amount that the parent listed under child support paid. And we still, any conflicting information, we typically reach out just to get some documentation to add to the file so that we can correct the FAFSA for you. But we do have the ability, all institutions with the FAFSA, to make an adjustment after we get, documentation from any conflicting information, and certainly correct it. And so, a lot of those things are, especially could affect the student's ability for need-based aid if the student is listing a high income. And there are ways that the student could, certainly make a mistake. There are students who have gotten early offers for example, for merit grants, and then get confused and list that under untaxable scholarship aid, which it's not. So, and that can affect their FAFSA figures in a positive way. So we do have some things built into our system to kind of catch those, but we also literally go through the FAFSA and we look for that. And if we see anything off, we're going to select them for institutional verification, and we're going to request documentation, or it could be as simple as just sending an email and getting some clarification, and then we can add it to the file. But we're going to do everything we can to make sure that those FAFSA figures are correct so that your student's getting certainly the most aid that they're eligible for.
So you're not in trouble.
Right.
Nobody's going to send you to the principal's office. Good. One of the questions had to do with when a parent can apply for financial aid. And by a parent applying for financial aid, I think that this person is referencing there's FAFSA, which you do before the student, while the student's applying to college. It's not before the student's applying, but like students starting to apply to college, maybe right around now, then you should be applying for the FAFSA and doing the CSS profile if it's needed by the institutions where your student's applying. In terms of scholarships though, and in terms of your loans, I think, do you need to be already accepted? Can somebody take that?
Yeah, so
Amir.
with regards to applying for financial aid, I always encourage families to do it as soon as possible, especially now that the FAFSA is completed as of October 1st, and we're asking for prior year information. Sometimes I get families who say, well, we may be applying to other additional schools, to which my response is, well, you can always add in the school's code, even if you have already submitted your FAFSA. So, you know, I have families that complete the FAFSA as early as, you know, when it becomes available on October 1st. And then I have folks, quite frankly, that completed, you know, August prior to the beginning of the fall semester. So, but it is encouraged to complete it sooner rather than later. That also allows us as the financial aid office to review you for aid, and perhaps if you're selected for verification, request that additional supporting documentation be submitted to us so we can get an award letter out to you as soon as possible. Because obviously, you know, attending college is a big financial decision that you and your family has to make. And so you want to be able to be a well-informed consumer, and having a financial aid award letter available will allow you to make that decision, whether or not you're going to go to school A, B, or C. So again, also, the other piece of this is that there may be institutional funds that are awarded to students on a first come, first served basis. So the earlier you're able to get your FAFSA in to that institution, the earlier we're able to consider you for some of that institutional aid, because some of that does exhaust, you know, over the course of the financial aid awarding process and awarding season. So the short answer is early bird catches the worm.
Thanks, Amir. And we don't have any other specific financial aid questions, and we are just about at time, but somebody had asked about what early decision is. So if anyone can just give a quick 30-second elevator pitch on what early decision is. Amanda.
Sure. So early decision is an admissions policy that some schools have, whereby if you apply early and are accepted, then you are bound to attend that school as long as it works out for you financially. So it is binding. The upside is that you can learn the admissions decision earlier. But if it doesn't work out for you financially, you could, you know, revoke that. But any family who might require financial aid, I always recommend that if the school has an early action policy whereby you could apply early and just learn of your acceptance early and not be bound to attend, it's preferable to do an early action instead of that. But I know some private institutions do early decision as well as some others. But if you're accepted, the assumption is that you're going to revoke your other applications and attend. But again, the one out for that is if it doesn't work out for the family financially.
Thanks for that answer. Thanks for all this great information. A huge shout out of thanks to Amir from Anna Maria College, Sue Ellen from Assumption University, Caitlin from Quinsigamond Community College, Jeremy from Worcester State University, and Amanda from WPI's Financial Aid Office. We really thank you for all this great information. This video has been recorded and will be available on the HECCMA website and on the HECCMA YouTube page, probably within 1 week's time. So if you didn't jot down all the information today, you can go back and refresh and fast forward to get the information that you need. Thanks so much for joining us today. Keep an eye on the HECCMA website for more information about future admissions and financial aid workshops. Have a good evening.